Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Plugged In. I'm Ellie Mandelbaum, an industry veteran who decided to do more than just listen to podcasts, but actually start one, in which I interview people much smarter than me. In this episode, we are speaking with Avner Halperin, CEO of EarlySense, an Israeli medtech company that monitors healthcare facility patients without ever touching the patient's body. I know, that sounds strange, but it's true. Avner is a veteran high-tech executive. He has served in several senior management positions, including CEO of Emunet, VP of Marketing at Radcom, VP Biz Development at Lenslet. Avner worked as the R&D manager at LDOT and was the department head of R&D unit in the IDF, where he participated in the Tapio project. EarlySense technology leverages big data and advanced machine learning algorithms to generate highly accurate health information, empowering clinicians to achieve early detection of adverse events and improve patient outcomes. In plain speak, they predict. They pretty much predict issues going on with the patient by monitoring their needs. And with that, Avner, welcome to the show. I hope I covered everything. I'm sure I didn't do justice to nearly as much as what EarlySense does. So why don't you fill us in a little bit more about EarlySense, and then we'll just jump into the conversation.
Great. Thanks for having me, Ellie. We at EarlySense really try to make a difference in taking care of patients by providing real-time information and improving the effectiveness of clinicians, nurses, and doctors. We do that by collecting large data on patients, as you said, without touching the body. We are, in the fairy tale of the princess and the pea, we are the pea, the sensor that goes right under the mattress, nobody feels it, and collects very accurate heart, breathing, motion, sleep information. And based on that, leverages big data analytics to provide early warning of change in condition and risks, and with that, empowers clinicians to intervene in time or early and provide for much better care. For example,
there we go. Yeah.
Patients who get pain medication have a risk of getting their breathing go down continuously, and many patients on pain medication actually get into what's called respiratory depression. And then if the nurse comes in within a few hours to check on them, these patients need to be intubated and moved into intensive care. If it takes the nurse a little longer to find out, that patient will be found dead. And that happens close to 60,000 times a year, every year in the U.S. So very significant numbers. We, instead of that type of issue being detected over hours, we detect that practically in real time within a couple of minutes. And then instead of intubating, moving to intensive care and so on, we actually empower them just to change medication or give a shot in the arm. And that whole risk of death, intensive care, intubation is resolved by a simple shot in the arm that costs $7.50. So that's one example of the big impact of early detection. I'll give you just one more quick example. Sepsis, infections in hospitals, probably the biggest risk for patients today across all medical systems. A patient who has developing sepsis, his chance of survival goes down by 8% every hour. That means if you get manual data only after 3-4 hours of spot checking, that patient is much higher risk of death and, of course, complications. We detect that in real time.
So again, before we get into it, so people are going to say, okay, but aren't patients hooked up to all these monitors, right? Aren't they, everything is, you have wires coming out of everywhere in the hospital, especially if they're in that much need. So how are they not doing it? How are you doing it? So just so before we get into everything else, let's just focus on that a second.
Sure. So actually, as surprising as it sounds, what you said now is a misconception. 80% of patients in hospitals today are not wired to anything. They're lying in bed in the corridor, sometimes at the end of the corridor, and the nurse or physician come into that room once every 3, 4, 5, or 6 hours, and nobody knows what happens in between. So basically, their medical care for 80% of patients in the U.S. happens based on old data. Amazing as it sounds, we do not have real time about the vast majority of patients. Why? Because it's complicated and expensive to put sensors on every patient, and it generates huge number of false alarms, what's called alarm fatigue. So we replace that complexity of putting multiple sensors on the body that is expensive and generates a lot of false alarms with an invisible sensor under the mattress. And then when you do that, you can actually monitor all the patients and not just the intensive care and the cardiology and high-risk patients, but monitor them all. And that's even before we start talking about taking those sensors into nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, and eventually, of course, into the home, where we want to keep most of the patients, of course.
Okay, so thank you for that, and that's definitely informative. So with that, we're going to just go into some early questions, and we'll move more on to where you are now. So when did you want to start, or better yet, when did you want to become the CEO? How did you become the CEO of Early Signs? Like, what led to that point?
Sure. So obviously, that was not the first thing I did in the high-tech industry, right? I started with, as you said, in the Army, and then doing other jobs of head of marketing and head of R&D and head of business development. So after I would say more than 4 or 5 positions in different companies, I felt I was ready. And I really wanted to start my own company and not just be a CEO, but CEO of my own thing. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the exciting and driving force for me. It took me a while to find the right idea. And today when I meet young entrepreneurs, what I often tell them is since the road of entrepreneurship is so tough, you have to wait until you find the right idea, because you have to be really engaged and motivated by it, because there'll be so many bumps and downs and challenges along the way that you really got to be engaged. And when I found an idea that really I got connected to, because it related initially actually to health of kids at home and to asthma, where I had a daughter with asthma, that really kind of motivated me, and that's why I co-founded the company and wanted to lead it from the first day, and I've been doing that now for over 14 years. So
thank you for that, and that's exactly so a lot of ideas start from a need. Mm-hmm. So you pretty much started the need based on your daughter having asthma, and so what you created something where it monitors when they sleep or when they're moving around all day.
So I actually met two of my co-founders who I have to they had the original idea and started with one of their children. Mm-hmm. Dr. Danny Lang and Yossi Gross actually started the initial concept of putting sensors and monitoring children in sleep at home. And when I joined them and I saw the original early concept, I said, wow, this is really exciting. It was engaging for me again because it was related to a problem I knew from my home. And all 3 of us really felt this is something that is both a real commercial impact, but is also meaningful for us because of our own personal experience.
I hear that. Okay, so I'm going to just go back a second now. So your first job, what did if you learned anything, did you learn anything that stayed with you, that really impacted you, saying, wow, that's something I really, really took from my first job, and I think that's something I need to really do in everything else?
So, tough to define what was really my first job, but I spent 6 years of my life in the Army doing R&D and managing projects for the Intelligence Corps. And I think the thing I got there where, the mission was so important, we were so engaged, we really saw the value of what we're doing for the security of Israel, that kind of the concept of no matter what, we're going to meet the schedule and deliver on time, on quality, because this is really important, and just go through walls if you have to make it happen. I think that's probably the most important takeaway I took from my Army years, and trying to take that now into also the startups that I was involved in throughout the years.
Okay, so now just jumping back, right? So you met your co-founders and you started off not really where you are now, right? So take us through some of the early days, right? So you had the product, you said it's a great idea, it serves a need that I see, and apparently other people see as well, was your co-founders pretty much built it off the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Same need. So how did how'd you start, right? You met them, loved the idea, convinced them to work together, and then you walk us through the early day.
Sure. So, we started with a concept and a need, as you said. We're very highly motivated. One of our co-founders, Dr. Lang, had really built an early prototype, so we knew it was feasible. And, you start by doing 2 things. One is trying to build a roadmap and showing that there is real clinical value in what you're doing. And 2 is raising money. And the 2 things kind of go hand in hand. And We really went through an iteration of collecting a little bit of data, then that leading to raising seed funding, using that to do a slightly larger clinical study, using that to build to do our first VC round, and with that really started to build the go-to-marketing and the more business aspect, and that's when we hit a wall, because we realized we had a great product and a fantastic technology, but no real business model and go-to-market possibility, because there was no reimbursement for a solution like we developed. And we understood, thankfully, relatively early in that time period, that while we were able to convince investors to put money on this concept, there is no real way to bring this technology to market. Not realistic that people will pay for it on their own, and reimbursement would not happen for probably a decade for such solutions. So we did what I think every startup almost has to do at some point in their lifetime, and that is pivot. Forget everything you thought about, and understand that even though you're emotionally very connected to that asthma idea, you have to make a change. And we made a change. Instead of going after kids with asthma, which was very exciting, we went after elderly people in hospitals. And by doing that, I think we saved early cents and made it into a viable company as it is today.
Got it. So, so a couple of things, right? So one is, why didn't you see that early on, right? I mean, again, it's an obvious thing, right? So, you're very blinded a lot by your first idea, right? You want to stick to it. It's hard for you to pivot. And when you realize that hospitals, elder care was really a viability, what did you do to prove that to your investors, right? Because you already raised funds now. Mm-hmm. Investors really don't have a long patience, right? They don't have an attention span that lasts a long time. So you have to really prove. And so you're collecting the data. You collected the data off your first idea first to raise the money. But now when you say to them, okay, we don't see any real monetization coming from that, hospitals, in a sense, is a much more viable option. But with the hospitals, you also have to deal with, you're dealing with Medicaid and all the different reimbursements. It's a much, I would say, political, bureaucratic battle, where your investors scared. Were you guys nervous? I mean, you're going, it's a behemoth of a giant you're going after to try and get reimbursed.
Yeah. So you raised a few questions, and all part of things that we had to tackle. So first of all, we started, what we did initially, we were wrong. I mean, we went after a very exciting technology, and we thought, if we as parents get excited by it and we would buy it, that means there is a real market for that. Today in retrospect, I know that was completely foolish. And especially the fact that if you think, especially based in Israel, that if you ask people around you if they'll buy it, that means there's a market. That's, again, obviously wrong, because we are not the target market here. And while people here in Israel, for example, would pay for such an asthma solution for their kids of their own money, in the U.S., if it's over $199.99 and there's no reimbursement, nobody will buy it. It's even more amazing in Germany, by the way, because there, if there is no reimbursement, the average customer will say, if there's no reimbursement, I probably don't need it. Which, think about it, is so different from anything in our culture here. So we made the basic standard mistake of entrepreneurs saying, if we and the people around us like it, it's a real thing. And, today when I meet people at this early stage, I tell them, first thing you do is you go spend time in the market and you talk to potential customers, even before you actually have a pilot and a prototype, just to understand the need and the willingness to pay, which is probably critical. So that was a mistake we made. That's the bad news. The good news was that we were willing to acknowledge that and accept that early on and make the pivot and convince our investors, which, as you said, was not easy. To do that, we took a small consulting firm in Boston. We went and did a survey of customers, and we came back with proof of customers saying, this hospital product, we would pay for that. This is the value proposition, clinical, economic, and marketing. And with that, we moved forward. And thankfully, our board was very cooperative and said, you know what? We understand that we have to make a change. You build a good case. Let's do the change now when we have enough money in the bank to do that. So that's what we did.
So pretty much you created a business model from that survey, right? So the survey legitimized a lot of that. Okay, so, you did that, and now, yeah. So you have the idea, you have the plan, execution now. So how do you go again? Because how many people were you at this time, right?
Yeah, at that time we were probably 15 people.
15 people. So you're 15 people, and that's the early days still, right? So you're not even getting the traction that you need to really scale.
Right.
So selling had to be a pain, right? It had to be again, selling to hospital. And again, I've never done that. But I know it's just a lot of hoops to jump through. And especially, did you need FDA approval? Did you need to get, once you're dealing with the realm of health, there's so many different, people that need to get approval and et cetera. So how'd that start, right? So you got the survey done, right? Fantastic. It's legitimized. We could do it. And then what happened?
Sure. So first of all, after we legitimized it, we had to develop it because we had to adopt the product. So that took a while. But along with what you said earlier, obviously the development is the easy part. Once you have the product ready, even getting the FDA clearance is the easy part. The tough part is selling. And in order to sell, especially in the clinical and the medical space, you have to generate a lot of proof points. So we had to spend a long time doing clinical studies, not just for FDA clearance, but to prove the value, to prove the value proposition, show that there is a real clinical improvement when you put the systems, show that because of the clinical improvement, you actually help the hospitals make more money. And only then you can start doing the sales. And then it becomes really challenging because who wants to buy from a small company in Israel, right? So there is no simple recipe here except to, go out and fight it, and through connections and by bringing a few top salespeople in the U.S., getting the first customers. And then it's kind of an iterative process because you bring first customers, and with that you get bigger companies interested. Bigger companies become interested and they start selling the product, you get more customers, and then you get even bigger companies involved. So it's an iterative process, by the way, that you cannot, in my mind, jump over any steps. You have to do the first sales yourself because the big companies will not do it. And you have to get the clinical data before that to get the first sales. So there is in the medical space, penetrating the market, the probably most important thing to understand is that it's a long process that requires significant budget and will be step by step in order to get the real let's say market domination or market presence. Nothing here can be jumped and skipped over in my mind to be realistic. And in doing that, you have to leverage experts in the field because we obviously didn't know it ourselves. So we brought experts to our board and experts to our sales and marketing team and key doctors to work with us. And that takes a lot of time and patience, but eventually the reward is very big.
I got it. So I wanted to talk about your bring your salespeople on because you said, so you did the first sales, right? And then you were bringing sales. So how do you find them, right? So what was your process of, and this goes to also scaling the company, was at this point in time, you definitely see traction happening, right? Because the clinical studies are working, you see where down the roadmap, you're seeing it's going to work, right? There's value there and people, and now you have to build it up and build a team to really start selling. So how do you go find them? And especially as an Israeli company, in Israel, again, the U.S. market is definitely, it's familiar, but it's still foreign. How do you find the right people there? You opened up an office there as well. What, was that the impetus to do it?
Yeah. No, so absolutely. First of all, I think the important thing to understand is that we don't understand the market here from Israel, and we can't do it remotely. And most of us, I would include myself in that, Israelis, don't know how to sell. Certainly not professional sales in the U.S. So yes, the objective was to start a subsidiary in the U.S. and recruit top sales professionals to work for us and lead the operation from the U.S. Now the challenge is that as an Israeli based here, I don't know how to recruit people. I don't know how to interview them. Here when I interview somebody, within 30 seconds I know of somebody that they know and I know. I know where they were in the army. I can't do the same thing in the U.S. Everybody has a fantastic resume, and I don't know what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
And beyond that, in many cases, top U.S. talent will not necessarily want to work for me. They want to work for U.S.-based leaders. So one of the things that really was a breakthrough for us that I recommend to any startup in that phase to do today is before recruiting the U.S. sales leadership to bring strong U.S.-based board members to the company. And that's what we did in early sense. We recruited two very strong and highly experienced top-level board members to join our board of directors. We were very fortunate in being able to do that, but I know of other companies who are doing that today as well. And then when I needed to recruit the sales talent, I had somebody actually to help me and even lead me in recruiting that talent, because these people are on our board of directors who manage multi-billion-dollar U.S. operations, know how to interview and choose the top sales U.S. sales talent, and the top U.S. sales talent like to work for them. They're not working for me and for a small Israeli company, but they're working for very high-profile board members that are part of the Early Sense organization. So it was really a win on all aspects, and I think helped us really break through into the U.S. market.
So what year was this all like?
This process took several years. Mm-hmm. I would say that we started building a real powerful U.S. operation about 5 years ago.
Okay,
so we're talking about 2014 or so.
Got it. And so finding these board members again, it's did you know them? Were you put in touch, or did you like cold call? Did you just say, what, this is my wish list, I want to reach out to them, the product speaks for itself, and let's see if they're going to bite?
So no, I don't think you can really, at least for me, it didn't work in cold calling. Mm-hmm. Turned out that one of these executives was an executive in a very large company that we were working with, and when he retired from that company, he was interested in us. So very often, top executives in relevant companies who have just left, and are interested in doing something, both for the interest, but also for really helping small companies, are very relevant to people. And, even in the large, the bigger U.S. market, you can often find somebody to connect you to these top leaders. And I would certainly, suggest to spend a lot of time in networking, with the relevant large companies, with the relevant executives at conferences, and find the right timing to try to bring some of those on board. That's what we did, and I definitely know now of more companies based in Israel that do that, and I think it's a very good idea.
Okay, so what was when you brought the sales team on board? What was the first challenge you faced? Right, you deployed which hospital? But hey, who's your first customer with the product?
So actually, our first beta customer in the U.S. was a hospital in L.A. called California Hospital Medical Center. Mm-hmm. And then we had one more in the Boston area called Metro West. So we had really kind of two early customers that we worked with very closely and became our most important reference sites for future growth. Did
you guys camp out there?
Did
you because some people are like, listen, especially depending on the product, they camp out there, they'll do whatever, because again, that's what's needed. So so those two you bid with, were there hiccups along the way? Did you guys say, oh wow, we're just, something needs to change, we're so awful, we're just a little tweak here and there, and it was good?
Oh, there were a lot of challenges and hiccups, and we started with the first product we thought was great, and we put it in an alpha site in that site in Boston, and the nurses hated it because the user interface was sucked really, and so we had to take it back and redo it and move to a new touchscreen interface and so on. So those things happen all the time. Then we went into California Hospital, we installed the system. We realized that there were too many false alarms. Again, had to redo the software, come back in. So absolutely, the first customers are the ones that have to be very friendly. You have to be there, and you have to be very quick on correcting things. On camping out there, 100% critically important, both to support and solve issues in the field, but also to bring the knowledge back into the engineering, because you really don't know what's needed until you have product in the field, and you have to have that data flow and that quick iterative improvements based on people being there and going back and forth all the time. So yes.
So it's funny, you were saying that, the nurses didn't like the interface, and it brings me back to the UX UI, right? I mean, because I'm sure you didn't think about that, right? You're just thinking about the end user. But the other end user is all the people, the nurses and everybody else who's interacting with that patient. They need to have an ease of use to really leverage that data, right? That capability. And so it's fun that you say that. So, and I'm sure that's happened a number of times since, where you're really listening to the user, to the customer, which is, have you ever thought about, or have you ever brought on, your early adopters to create more of a focus group in-house, or to listen to them and help drive more of the UX UI?
Yes, and you're absolutely right about what you said. Getting the users involved as early as possible is something that is critically important. Initially, we didn't do enough of that. But I have to tell you that even when you do everything the right way and you bring them in, when you build kind of visionary breakthrough product, it's very tough for your customers to imagine when sitting in the room what it will be like to use the system. And they look at it and say, yeah, it looks good. And then after 24 hours of using it in the field, they find out many different issues. So really, the model of getting into the market quickly with an early product, kind of the lean development process, in my mind is really the right one, because doing huge studies before that and bringing big groups and focus groups can only go so far. There is no real way to know how the product and how the usage will be in the field until you have kind of an MVP, a minimum viable product in there in use. And then from there do the quick improvement cycles.
Okay, so you're pretty much 2014 is coming along and you're scaling nicely, right? Mm-hmm. So, how do you build? Again, two companies, right? You have a company in the U.S. and a company here. So it's how are you vetting both, right? I mean, are you delegating a lot? Are you still, everything must come through you, I'm sure, as CEO. But how did you find good people, and not only that, but the company culture you're trying to build, right? Was that something that you have in mind, that you wanted to create some atmosphere, or just it's whatever comes, it is? No,
I think all the points you raise are key issues. None have simple answers, but I'll share some thoughts. It turned out I actually did some research at MIT on how Israeli companies should work in the U.S. And there was a lot of questions around that, because I said it's two separate companies. You want them to be integrated around one set of values, but you also have to respect the fact that the U.S. culture and the Israeli culture are different, and so you can't run the U.S. entity like an Israeli company and vice versa. And people who try to do that have failed. So, like anything else in life, it's a balancing act. What we did is we set up an American subsidiary. We had one of our executives here from Israel move to the U.S. To help build the bridge, and when needed, call from there to here in Hebrew and solve problems. But we also recruited a very strong president of our U.S. operations, and we let that very talented person run that operation with a lot of autonomy, because you have to manage U.S. salespeople through U.S. leadership and U.S. culture and U.S. rules. On the other hand, there are some kind of overarching company values, the focus on actually doing good for patients, the focus on caring for our employees as well, and of being very, very honest about what we do. These are things that, of course, unite us all. Every time a patient is saved with our system, we announce it and we celebrate that as a whole organization, and we share that information. We do quarterly updates for the whole company. But we also understand that the Israeli team will work in one way and the U.S. team will work in the other way, and we'll get them to interact as often as possible. And I haven't found the perfect formula. We keep on improving and learning every time from our mistakes. But it's all about knowing that it's two different organizations working very closely together around a common cause, each in slightly its own ways and with its own local leadership. And that balance is what I think has allowed us to be successful.
Okay, and so, with that, I mean, do you do team building across the, like, once a year? Do you get together? Again, because again, as you're saying, they're two different companies, but it's the same umbrella. They're still sharing the same, again. And do you also do sales from here, or do you rely mainly on the sales department in the U.S.? Are you going globally? Are you working in other countries as well, deployment wise?
So, all sales to the U.S. are done from the U.S., and I think that's the right way to do it. You really can't manage U.S. sales from Israel. I don't think it's effective. We do manage everything that's non-U.S., Europe and Asia here from Israel, and we work with local partners in each of these countries. We don't yet have subsidiaries in other countries. We may in the future. And yes, we invest a lot of time and effort and money in connecting the people. So as management, we meet quarterly, either in the U.S. or in Israel. We have engineers and executives fly back and forth as much as possible, even though it's expensive. And we invest a lot in high quality video conferencing and try to do as much live interaction as possible, knowing, by the way, that the worst way to communicate in terms especially about anything that's challenging and confrontational is email. So anytime anything is an issue, you move directly to voice or even live video conversation because email is awful. And you have to understand that. And as much as possible, face-to-face interaction to get people aligned and motivated along the same line.
The second company I just recently heard about that, pretty much they can't use email for big issues, right? It just like
email is just for transferring information, writing summaries, and so on. But anything becomes confrontational, especially when you have on one end of the email people whose English is not a native language, and with the cultural difference, things can become very difficult very quickly just because somebody wrote a sentence that can be misread and misinterpreted and sent it to 15 people in a CC. So yes, rule here is, whenever things become more complicated, you pick up the phone or get on a video call, and that's how you solve it. And if really that's not enough, you get on the plane. Okay. That's what you have to do.
Do you do training for your sales guys? I mean, I'm assuming you had to, because it's a simple product in theory, but it got to be complex to sell.
Yes, it's not a simple product, and it's certainly a complex clinical sale because you're bringing a new solution. That means collecting information about patients, getting real-time data, and intervening in time. So it's absolutely, we invest a lot in sales training. We bring all the salespeople in the U.S. to a national sales meeting, which we just did a few weeks ago in our Boston office. And then we bring people both from Israel and from the U.S. To train them and on the other hand, to listen to them. I mean, it has to be a two-way communication. I mean, these people really know what's going on, not us here, right? They know what's going on. And so they give us their feedback. We share with them next generation. We work about the future, but also train them on what's immediate. And then during the year, you have people go on joint sales calls, and you have again voice, video training, and so on. It's data exchange and information exchange is really an endless process. It's not the one-time thing. It's not a one-time training for the sales team, and also, of course, for customers.
Mm-hmm. So, are you, we're going to hopefully wind down in a few minutes, but what new markets are you going after, right? So we know that you're in hospitals. You're going after the elder care, so nursing homes, retirement homes. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing success with that? Are they more adverse because some aren't, necessarily getting reimbursed from the government or Medicaid, Medicare? Are you working with, are you going to go after the rehab as well? Because your product really goes across a lot of different verticals in a sense.
You're absolutely right. And, one of the challenges and opportunities is that there are so many opportunities and you have to prioritize them. So there is growth, first of all, in terms of getting into more and more hospitals and large hospital networks. Then it is expanding across the continuum of care to post-acute, skilled nursing, rehab, nursing home. That in the U.S. has been extremely successful for us and actually been a powerful growth driver for us to go outside the hospital. Then, longer term, the future where we are still building the infrastructure is to go into the homes of patients, right? Where we want people to eventually be. So that's kind of one axis of growth and expansion. The other is geographic. So we're looking at the European and Asian markets. We are on the verge of getting first approvals in China and Japan. We see a huge opportunity in the Asian market with real issues around aging, and the European markets as well. And the interesting thing is that something we learn in the US market, we can then bring to Europe and Asia, and vice versa. We've now seen specific success in one type of units in Europe that we're now trying to bring into the US. So that kind of back and forth learning between different geographic markets while we expand across the continuum of care has led to a lot of our growth over the last couple of years.
Okay. So, I'm going to, go into your employees, and we'll go a little bit more into your funding and the revenue model as well. So what do you want for your employees? And how many employees do you have at the moment?
So we are close to 150 people. And, we are very proud of the fact that many of them have been with us for a long period of time.
High retention rate.
High retention rate, very low attrition. People here, at first, I think, see value and impact and really the difference that they're making in the world. And on the other hand, we're investing a lot in people developing over time. So we are very proud of the fact that we had people join us as students and grow through the years to become vice president in the company.
So you promote from within.
People. We promote as much as possible from within. We also believe that while people work hard and should work hard, they should also have a life. We do believe in a life. And so, we're proud of the fact that, people who joined us at a young age, get married, have kids, and grow and expand, do an additional degree and get educated, all of that, while doing very serious work here. We are huge believers in diversity. We speak 13 native languages here. We're very close to being balanced between men and women, including in management levels. And, the ages here are also varied from 17-year-old to 77. Literally, the whole age range is covered. And, one of our best engineers is 77 years old, and we're very proud of the fact that he keeps on working and delivering day over day and being a role model for the younger people in the company.
No, you don't hear that a lot, so that's good to hear. So, and the revenue model, right? So, is it based per bed? Is it based, per number of, hours? I mean, how is it structured?
So, revenue model is very important, and we actually made some differences. And part of the kind of real breakthrough and acceleration in growth we had about 18 months ago was the fact that we moved from a capital sales model to more of a SaaS model, where many of our customers, not all, but many of them, choose to pay on a per-day basis. So there is, it's not a capital purchase. It's actually whenever there is a patient in the bed that's being monitored, they pay. And whenever there is no one in the bed, they don't pay. And the reason it's very effective is because there is a strong ROI statement that whenever there is a patient in the bed, the medical institution saves between tens of dollars to hundreds of dollars per day of use. And what they pay per day is much less than that. So they're profitable on our system from the first day with practically no risk. And that allows, on one hand, very fast adoption and growth. And on the other hand, for us as Early Sense, a very attractive business model of recurring revenue growing year over year that investors like to see very much.
And have you seen that year over year, right? So when you started again, 2014 was a big shift you guys had. And so, have you seen 100 growth? What type of growth have you seen, especially now more? I think now, the product's a bit more mature. Are you seeing more people in hospitals? Are you seeing more patients? Not even in hospitals. I would say on a daily basis, because that's really what you're going by is, per day, which I would say makes sense, right? Why should someone pay for it if they're not using it per se?
Yeah, what we've seen is very fast growth recently. We've seen the fact that, with a new business model, sales cycles have shortened. Hospital sales cycles tend to be long, especially for capital purchases, and very often are well over a year. Now that we have expanded across the continuum and moved to more of a SaaS model, we see sales cycles of less than 6 months. And we've seen fast growth because, again, of that quick adoption rate. We just announced last week a very important milestone for us, monitoring patient number 1 million. So it's a huge achievement. Not many companies that do a breakthrough product reach the lives of 1 million patients. We're extremely proud of that. And I think that new business model is an important part of the fast growth that enable us to do that.
How did you get to that, though, right? So, capital purchase to SaaS, that's not an easy, shift.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of chutzpah in a sense, right? To say, okay, it's not really working well, and let's try and shift it, and then really, commit to it.
You're right, by the way. I mean, first of all, there is a risk in that, right? And only after doing a couple of years in capital sales or a little more, and understanding that when people start using our systems, they keep using them because they see the value, we said, you know what? We can bring some of that risk onto ourselves. We'll put the systems out there, and once a customer starts using it, they will continue because of the value. So I don't know, if in retrospect we could have done that from the onset. Probably not, because we didn't have enough confidence and enough data to do so. But at some point when we started seeing the picture, and again, have to be also appreciative of the fact that we had the support of our board of investors, because that's more of a cash-hungry model. Mm-hmm. That's when we could really do that change. So like many things, you can do such breakthroughs at the right timing when you've already built the infrastructure. And we are very happy that the results of that change.
All right, so we're going to wind down and a couple of questions. So, did you have a mentor or someone that you turned to for advice when you were, especially as a young CEO, going back again from 2000, I think it was 14 years already. Did you have someone you turned to that said, okay, I'm not sure if I should do this? Did you have someone?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the great things about the Israeli ecosystem is that there's always somebody ahead of you and somebody behind you. So definitely, I turned to several kind of more experienced CEOs than myself to get guidance. For example, Ori Adomi, the CEO of Mazor, that was just acquired for $1.6 billion, was always a few years ahead of us, and was kind enough to share his wisdom and insight, and that helped me a lot. And now I, of course, do the same and provide support and guidance and advice to CEOs who are a few years behind me, and hopefully will be the next big thing. And I think that's one of the very nice things in our system here.
Okay. So what did you want to be when you were 15? If you remember. You wanted to be a pilot?
Yeah. Definitely wanted to be a pilot.
And when did that dream die? Were you upset?
Yeah, when you hit real time in real life and you see that you don't necessarily have the physical capabilities to do that. So then I thought about being a doctor, and eventually found myself in the high-tech area, and I think kind of went back to the being a doctor dream through technology. And
you're pretty close to that field now.
Exactly, close to that field, and really believe, and we have the data to show it, that we are making a lot of impact and saving many lives. I mean, just last year, our statistics showed over 3,000 lives were saved with our system. So that's really a very rewarding thing. So again, my way to close the loop of being in the medical space and helping people.
Okay, and is there a habit or something that you do on a daily basis to keep you on top of your game?
I think the maybe two things is one, kind of going home is process what I did right, and mainly, of course, what I did wrong that day, and trying to kind of work some lessons out of that and learn from that for the next day. I mean, I make so many mistakes every day that I try to learn from them and do a little better the following day. And I think that feeling of continuous improvement is crucial for success, and that's what's been driving me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. For those who are listening, make sure to subscribe to Plugged In Podcast, and make sure you rate us on iTunes. Every rating helps. Thank you so much, Avner. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Eli. It was a pleasure.